always a great idea to bring your equipment out, check it out. There's a couple of pointers that I'd like to mention. There's not a whole lot to it really, but you just want to make sure that your equipment's going to function to the best of its ability. And so you always just want to do a quick visual, walk around your equipment, make sure everything looks okay. An important thing to do is check your power cord, your phaser nicks. Sometimes they get run over, and you just want to make sure that you have no bare wires. It's also a great idea to pull the covers off, at least from the side. Sometimes over the winter, critters have a habit of getting up inside, making a nest. Just want to do a quick visual, make sure there's nothing in there that looks out of the ordinary. You can also do a quick visual on all your wiring, make sure everything looks okay. And then you want to plug your equipment in. You want to make sure that the display lights up. You want to make sure that you can hear your fan free and clear with nothing obstructing it. At this point you want to wait for the compressor to kick on, which is usually about a minute and a half. And then come back in 10 or 15 minutes and make sure that you're getting a frost line on the inside of the freezer. So you can open lids, whether it's a storage or a server. Feel around the top if it's getting cold. Close your lid and then come back in 2 or 3 hours just to make sure that everything's working great. If you come back in a couple hours and the temperature's been dropping steadily, chances are that your equipment is perfectly fine. If not, I would just report that to someone so that we can get that looked at, taken care of for you, so you have a successful season. Let's visit handles for a second. Handle fits on the lid of the freezer and it does what it says. It's a handle, so you use it to open and close the freezer. It's a pretty simple little deal. It's held in place 2 screws, typically Phillips head. It has a little simple lock barrel. The lock mechanism, turn the key, turns the catch. The catch catches on the striker. We'll get there in a little bit. But for now, what do we do with the loose handle? So a handle sometimes get loose, opening and closing millions of times. So what do you do to fix that? Well, first you have to access the screws. You do that by removing this plastic insert. The easiest way to do that is with a utility knife or a pocket knife. You just run the blade right into the edge between the insert and the handle. And the insert pops out, which exposes the 2 screws. And at this point, all we need to do is tighten the screws. So, Phillips head, a couple cranks in there, snug them down. Kind of hard to get to sometimes. Alright. So now the handle is tight. And then to reinsert the insert, it's easiest if you take the insert and bend it in the middle, put both ends first, snap the middle in, just like that, and your handle is tight. Staying with handles, this is the other half of it. It's called a striker. Basically what this is the catch or the latch. When you turn the key, the catch catches on this little hook. As you can see, this one's kind of bent down. Typically, we want something more like that. And so what's happened here is the striker's been bent down and the freezer will no longer lock. So we turn the lock and you can see the catch is not engaging the striker. So what do you do with that? So usually all you need to fix this is a pair of pliers or a hammer. But if you grab the front of the striker, just gently bend back up so that the striker is perpendicular to the body of the freezer. Typically that's all you need to do. You have to be careful, sometimes you'll snap that off. If you do, a number 15 Torx is usually what holds these on. So it's like the one for the handle screws, it's just a little smaller. You can say it's a number 15. So once you bend that back out, close the lid, turn, and we have a locking freezer once again. Alright, let's address lid gap. What is it and where does it come from? So lid gap is basically what it is. The lid doesn't close properly. Typically this happens when the freezer needs defrosting. Warm air rushes in, it creates frost, and the frost kind of grows, and eventually the lid doesn't close properly anymore. So what do we do to fix that? So the first thing we want to do is remove the hinge covers. There may or may not be screwed on, but just be a couple of Phillips head screws. And just hold those in place. Remove the screws and these pop off, which exposes the hinges. So the hinges, the lid is held in place with 8 screws, 4 per hinge on the body, and then of course 4 per hinge on the top, but really we won't mess with the ones on the lid. We just want to deal with the ones on the body. The thing to remember about hinges is never take the screws all the way out. These are under tension. That bad boy flies at your face at 500 miles an hour, it will definitely hurt. So the first thing we want to do is we want to loosen the hinges. This is going to be typically a number 25 Torx bit. Alright, so 25 Torx bit. It kind of looks like a star. You can get them at the hardware store. Typically that's what the hinges are held on place with. So it's important that you have one of these in your tool bag. So what we're going to do is we're going to loosen the screws and the hinges. Just a couple turns, just so that it has a little slack. The lid is not completely tight. It's important to do both sides. As you can see, as we loosened that, you saw the lid sort of settle down a little bit. Of course, if there's frost buildup, it's important that you defrost your freezer before attempting this. So once the screws are loose, to reset the lid, you just want to open the lid and close the lid. And then it's important to get a proper seating so that the spring forces the lid to close. You just want to put that on the lid a little bit. And then at this point, you just come back in. I usually put a little pressure on the lid itself with my other hand, and I just tighten my screws back down. You just want to snug these up. You don't want to over tighten them. If you over tighten them, strip them, and the lid will not seat properly. Have a lid with a really good seal. We've covered freezers with storage lids. We also have the option to have a serving freezer lid. The lid consists of an upper and a lower. There are 3 models that will allow this option. You have a 31, which is the larger. In the middle we have a 21, and at the end we have an 11. The 21 model also has an option to have a solid glass or a solid panel lid. This works great, especially if you're outside of events where sunlight can be an issue through a glass lid. The solid lid just really helps combat that. We can also tint the lids, but solid lid we found works much better. So as I was saying, the sliding lids come with an upper and a lower. They go on the freezer a certain way. If you put them on backwards, then of course the freezer lids will not lock. The upper lid has the lock in it. One of these corners. So here, it's just a simple key lock. The arm swings down, and you'll see it actuates with the slot in the bottom lid. I'll show you on an 11 how these actually work. The lid's installed one way and one way only in order for you to have secure lids. As you can see, we have these little plastic, what we call rail guides, and the lids slide in the track, and those interact with the lid guides so that when you put your lids on, they will be secure when you lock it. So they only, like I said, they only go one way, and a good thing to remember, or a good way to remember is if you're facing the freezer with the display at your bottom right ankle, the lids will go in place so that the lock mechanism is closest to you. So it just slide in place and lock in. And so the lock, you can see, is right here in front of you. The lock just spins down, and now your lids are secure. You can't lift those off. If you were to reverse them, although the lids are closed, anyone can walk up and pick the lid up when the lids are closed. So that's sliding lids. Okay, Velcro dots. What do they do? What are they for? So, a natural occurrence that happens when the freezer lid is closed is you get what's called the vacuum. I'm sure you've heard that at your house when you close the freezer door, and you can hear the wind whistling sort of kind of sound. What that is, it's a natural vacuum that's created from the opposite high and low pressure, which will naturally go away in a few seconds, but we try to kind of help prevent some of that vacuum lock by our Velcro dot. So what does it do? Well, we place it on the lip of the freezer, usually 3 or 4 inches in from the edge. Self-sticky, sticks down, and basically what that does is it helps with the amount of pressure that the vacuum creates when the lid is closed, so that if you close the lid and try to open it again really quick, it'll just kind of help breaking the handle or bowing the lid. So that's Velcro dots. Let's talk defrost for a second. Eventually all freezers need defrosting. It's just the nature of the beast. And so what you get is, of course, frost buildup in the freezer around the lip. And the best way to take care of that, believe it or not, is not with a chisel or a hammer or a screwdriver or an ice pick. It's really important really not to beat on any of this. For one, this is plastic, so you can split it or crack it. And the other thing is refrigerant lines run along the inside of the walls. That's the frost you can see. And if you poke a hole in that, or bend it or dent it, then the freezer loses its ability to cool efficiently. So really the best way to defrost, believe it or not, is just unplug your machine. So there goes the power. Unplug it. Move all your product to a different freezer. Come back tomorrow. Important thing to remember as well is when you are defrosting, this is the outside drain plug. You just want the arrow pointing up. That way your freezer, as moisture accumulates in the bottom from the melting ice, it won't drip out on the floor. So we'll come back tomorrow and see how it goes. Now that it's been 24 hours, as you can see, all the frost is melted. The next stage is to drain the freezer. So you just want to take any sort of little container. This is just a little Tupperware, but it'll go right underneath the plug. And then to drain, you just pull the plug out and then spin the arrow facing down. As you can see, the water runs right out. You collect that in your dish. And then once drained, you just pop the freezer out and you're good to go. Once all the water is drained out of the freezer, you just want to take a towel, wipe everything down, dry it out.